Harbor Downtown Development Authority's February 1st meeting, 2023. Thanks everyone for attending. We'll get started with a roll call. Maura, please help me out.
Sure. Micah Bartelme, Steve Brummer,
Here.
Alex Deek, Milton Mahoney,
Here.
Tyler Kinley,
Present.
Jessica Letaw, Jonathan Massey, Darren McKinnon,
Present.
Mike Nicklon,
Here.
Fressa Nichols, here, and Danielle Vaughn. Here.
Thank you. Moving ahead, we do have a change to the board meeting agenda.
I to make a motion to amend the agenda regarding item 8 subcommittee reports. I would propose that we do capital improvements committee first, and then the finance committee second. So it'd be a B to A and A to B.
Second. All those in favor of a motion to amend the board meeting agenda as stated, please say, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Motion passes. I think we now need to still approve the board meeting agenda. That is the amendment, so do I have a motion to approve the board meeting agenda?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. All those in favor of approving the board meeting agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The motion passes. Thanks for that. Next, we have public comment. We have 4 people maximum, 4 minutes each. We have one person listed, Mr. Peter Eckstein. Eckstein? Yes, either. You have 4 minutes.
Well, thank you. I want to speak to you today, really on behalf of 2 people you never knew. This is Adam Ismail, and this is Lucas Atkinsmith. Lucas jumped from one of the parking structures 4 months ago. Adam jumped exactly 1 week ago. They're just the latest in more than half a dozen people in the past few years who have jumped to their deaths from your parking structures. They will never have a chance to reconsider their decisions because you provided such wonderful venues to do it so efficiently and so quickly. Adam climbed a rooftop chain link fence and jumped over it. Lucas found a gap in some rooftop fencing. Early in 2020, another troubled young man found a 3rd floor window on Liberty Square that would never get fenced over. The rooftop gap has been addressed, but only crudely, I would say. I'll give you pictures of it. And the window is still uncovered. The window from which that kid jumped to his death is still uncovered 3 years later. My God. Each would have been a simple matter, probably costing no more than a few $1,000s. Now, the bigger job is fencing over all the windows above the 2nd floor. That would cost something, a few $1,000s. More than a few $1,000s. And addressing the rooftop fencing is a bigger job, either by adding shields on the top of the fences or by replacing them with more secure barriers. But with, I see $29 million in the bank, I think the DDA can afford to spend even $1 or $2 million if it comes to that, and I doubt it. But I don't think you can afford not to spend it. I've looked at the stuff on the website from you on this. I don't find a necessary sense of urgency. 4 months after Lucas jumped, I read you still hope to obtain sometime in February engineering recommendations and best practice review of rooftop fencing. Then will come requests for bids, submission of bids, review of bids, award of bids, and then maybe work can begin. As for covering windows, a contractor did that work 5 years ago. Not one of those windows that's been covered with chain link has been breached. Why can't that person be contacted, that contractor be contacted immediately and hired to fill in the remaining gaps? If you need emergency dispensation for an emergency situation, ask the city attorney, ask the city administrator, ask the city council, but don't be so bound by your old procedures that business as usual prevents you from dealing with such an emergency. I've had a long personal history over the years with suicide. I've learned that it sprays guilt in every direction. Why did I do that? Why didn't I do that? Why did I say that? Couldn't I have done more to remove obstacles or make the person happy? Suicides from parking structures can be contagious. So expect more in the coming months. If they come, and if you've not acted as absolutely quickly as you can and as vigorously as possible to block them, each of you, I'm afraid, will feel some measure of guilt, which may haunt you for months or even years. So please do everything you can as fast as you can. Do it for the young people whose deaths you might prevent, but do it to protect yourselves from a gnawing sense of guilt.
Peter, that's enough. That we've gone past 4 minutes.
Okay. I would like to leave this with you and give you some handouts. I think I need to pass these around.
Thanks, sir.
And these are just portraits of the two young men who killed themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't know where I should. I hope you could post them as a reminder of the urgency of the situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We don't have anyone else signed up for further public comment. Thank you, Peter Eckstein. Next up is reports from city boards and commissions.
Hi, Gail. Peter Honeyman, I'm a member of the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council. I'm going to be reading the minutes from last month's meeting and this month's meeting. So the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council, which works to advise the DDA and City Council about issues and opportunities that affect downtown livability, met in person and over Zoom on Tuesday, January 3rd. After an engaged conversation about recent developments, the council met with Jonathan Lay, a caseworker in the city's nascent Supportive Connections program. Supportive Connections is a gap service funded by WE dollars that serves individuals at risk of engaging with law enforcement. Supportive Connections serves them by interfacing with multiple agencies on issues of mental health, substance abuse, housing, and child protection services. It's only half of the minutes from that meeting, but I might mention that our interest. We have a focused interest on the sense of feeling safe downtown as downtown residents, and I think everyone that lives and visits Ann Arbor has the same interest. It's pretty clear that the Supportive Connections program, as a gap service, doesn't really address it's really the unarmed response program that we're looking forward to. What do we do about people, cavorting in the alleys, breaking into apartments, things like that, harassing people downtown. The sense among the CAC is that ordinary armed response is inappropriate there. It leaves us kind of with no tools. So we are waiting patiently for the unarmed response program. But it was useful to get a sense of what we can do now with the Supportive Connections program. Okay, we met again last night. We always meet the night before the board meeting. And after a review of recent meetings and developments, Dr. Missy Stultz, the city's Sustainability and Innovations Director, joined the meeting and presented an outline of the city's efforts to make Ann Arbor one of the most sustainable and equitable cities in America. This was followed by an active and engaged discussion of a whole host of strategies and tactics to combat climate change, from the community climate action millage to notions of a circular economy, to heat pumps and other electrification tactics, to building code changes at the state level. Again, scant minutes. I'll mention though that some of these tactics, like electrification, replacement of gas appliances, heat pumps, and things like that, offers perhaps an opportunity for DDA to engage directly with downtown residents in a supportive program to promote electrification. Something maybe to think about over the next few years. Any questions?
I have a question real quick. I just want to make sure I heard something right pertaining to the January 3rd meeting. Did you say they were planning an unarmed police response for break-ins?
I didn't say that.
I think
what I said was we don't really have the tools. We don't have a full complement of tools for dealing with issues involving crime on the streets of downtown Ann Arbor.
you mentioned break-ins to apartments. So they're talking about an unarmed police response for a break-in in an apartment?
We're looking for the full spectrum of tools. And everyone's opinion differs on this. Certainly, one of the members actually was directly affected by this and remains kind of freaked out about it, kind of terrified of the consequences. I'm from Detroit, so it's a little bit different for me, and I actually would not want to engage with the police on a break-in. My apartment has been broken into, and I understand that the real crime that is perpetrated is the crime of imposing poverty on people. People trying to escape from poverty are themselves left with few options. So for myself, I don't see a role for police except in things like violent crime.
Okay, thank you.
We can disagree.
No, yeah, I'm just curious to make sure I heard you right. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Peter. I think that's it on all four reports from city boards and commissions. Next up is the executive director report. Laura.
Thank you, Tyler. As Mr. Eckstein has already addressed, we had a tragedy today at the Ann Ashley parking structure. A young man died of suicide, and I can tell you I speak on behalf of all DDA staff when I say that we grieve his death and we extend our most heartfelt condolences to his family, his friends, and everybody that loved this young man. I also want to acknowledge the staff at PCI, our parking operator, and the first responders who are on the scene. It goes without saying that this is just a terribly devastating situation for everybody involved, and they did their best at the time. The DDA's work on fall prevention fencing has continued. Right now, we are working on getting fencing on all of the remaining open levels below rooftop but above floor 2. So right now, about 80% of that area has been covered. We have 20% left, and we anticipate having that work done before the end of this fiscal year, so before June 30th. At the same time, we have engaged with our engineering firm, and our engineers are right now underway with a comprehensive review of all of the rooftop fencing. We have asked them to come back to this board and provide us with best practices, fencing options, and they will be at the February Operations Committee. The engineering team will be here, and they will be presenting this information, and I believe that meeting is on February 22nd. I also reached out last week to community mental health. Jada and I will be meeting with the executive director of CMH along with some of our other staff members next Monday. And the purpose of that meeting is a couple of things. One, we want to review all of the signage that we currently have displayed in structures. Like, do we have the most accurate information? We want to make sure we're getting that signage right. But in addition to that, we want to talk to them about any recommendations they may have for additional messaging. Since 2017, when the city passed the Public Safety and Mental Health Millage, CMH has actually been able to do some public health campaigns. You may have seen on the interior and exterior of buses, they have ran some messaging. So we want to talk through, does any of that make sense for us to have on display at our structures? The final thing I want to say on this topic is if you or anybody in your world is struggling, there is help available 24/7. You can call 988, which was something I didn't realize, or you can text hello to 741-741. This is the Suicide Crisis Lifeline. And I think as humans, we genuinely all really care about each other. But I think in the day-to-day noise of life, we sometimes forget that. And I think when we get to the lowest point in our lives, sometimes we feel really alone. So that is all I have to say on that terrible subject. The other thing I want to report out is the DDA will be co-hosting the Bicycle Film Festival next Wednesday at the State Theater. So this is a film festival that is a collection of curated short films that celebrate the bicycle. We are co-hosting this with our partners at WVW. The DDA's part in this, we will be showing our bikeway educational video before each of the two showings. The 7 p.m. show has already sold out. There is a 9 p.m. show, so if anybody is interested in the Bicycle Film Festival, there are tickets available at mishtheater.org. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is DDA members' communications. Do we have any communications from members? I guess I just wanted to say that after last week's tragedy, there's a lot of conversation between myself and other board members more on the subject, and it has weighed heavily on a lot of people here, and I just wanted to express condolences and grief at the event, and that it is in no way being taken lightly. Full attention being paid to everything that we can do. Thanks. Moving ahead to the approval of minutes, we will need a motion to approve the November, December, and January minutes.
So moved.
Second. Second, yeah, Mike. Thank you. All those in favor of approving the November, December, and January minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Motion passes. Next up is subcommittee reports. As we said before, we are switching capital improvements to first. So in the absence of Alex and Jess, I'll be going through those. We do have a number of resolutions, but overall they are fairly straightforward, approving cost shares, extending agreements, and moving ahead with some people-friendly streets. So the first up is a resolution to grant $135,000 to the City of Ann Arbor for bikeway sweeper equipment. I'd like to move, sorry, got a little lost there. I'd like to move the following resolution. The resolution to grant the $135,000 to the City of Ann Arbor for bikeway sweeper equipment. Do I have a second?
Support. Second.
Thank you. Okay, discussion. As a quick overview, this is essentially our 50-50 cost share split for a bike sweeper, a bikeway sweeper that essentially right now there are consistently vehicles parking in the bike lane, and we'd like to install a small barricade at the entrances to the bikeway. However, to do so, the current sweeper that goes in would not be able to manage through that. So this is a cost share with the city to essentially get a sweeper that can manage that smaller gap. I'll just go through some notes here. Despite measures taken, illegal loading continues. The current design is that we're proposing, which is installing a centerline delineator, would be an effective solution. The cost is a total of $270,000. The city does plan to expand the bikeway network outside of the downtown, and that'll also require the use of a narrower street sweeper, which is what's being discussed here. The resolution is for a grant of $135,000, 50-50 split. Are there any questions or comments?
Who covers maintenance of the equipment?
I believe that would be the city covering the maintenance. Amber is here in the audience and she's nodding, so that is correct. I'll bring her up here. She's been extremely helpful for all of this if need be. Would you like to share any further detail?
Sure. The city of Ann Arbor will purchase the equipment and be responsible for maintenance and replacement of the equipment.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
I guess I'll just say, as we continue to expand our bike network, we also realize that there's a lot of demand for delivery services of all sorts, and as we increase our residents downtown, that demand is only going to increase as well. So I appreciate the effort to keep them out of the bike lanes, but we need to keep in mind that these drivers are trying to do their job, and they need a place to be able to do their job. So when we look at our curb management study and other things we do, this is kind of akin to the squirrel and the bird feeder. We're going to keep trying different ways to keep the squirrel from getting the bird seed. They're going to get the bird seed. And so we need to try to figure out where these guys should go and not just tell them where they can't go.
The nice thing is, in a few bits, we have we can move forward the resolution for the circulation study. So that'll be part and parcel. Are we all comfortable moving ahead here? Are there any other questions or comments? Board? Seeing none. All those in favor of the resolution to grant $135,000 to the city of Ann Arbor for bikeway sweeper equipment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The motion passes. Next up, the resolution, or I guess I need to move it here. I'd like to move the resolution to approve an agreement between the city of Ann Arbor and the Downtown Development Authority for sidewalk repairs within the DDA district during the fiscal year 2023 through fiscal year 2026. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Open discussion. I'll go over a little bit of the details here. This is essentially extending an agreement that's already been in place. The options for maintaining the downtown sidewalks, they're dictated by city code. Since code changes in 2012, the DDA signed an agreement with the city of Ann Arbor for sidewalk repairs within the district. This resolution just renews that agreement for this period from 2023 fiscal year to 2026. Under this agreement, the DDA pays its capture of the sidewalk village to the city, and in return, the city maintains the sidewalks within the DDA district. The city managed program has been working successfully since 2012, and they sort of have gotten a good handle on continuing this work. Overall, this is simply extending an agreement that's already been successful and in place. So that gives you a little overview of what we're talking about here. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Fairly straightforward. So all those in favor of the resolution to approve an agreement between the City of Ann Arbor and the Downtown Development Authority for sidewalk repairs within the DDA district during fiscal year 2023 through fiscal year 2026, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. Motion passes. Next, I'd like to move the following resolution, the resolution to approve a contract with Smith Group for the 4th Avenue Design and Engineering. Now, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Open discussion.
I need to recuse myself from this and the next resolution due to a conflict with my spouse's employee at Smith Group.
Thank you. Recuse Aaron. Any discussion? I'll just sort of go over this again. This first resolution will transition the 4th Avenue project from its conceptual design phase to engineering and construction. We have a people-friendly streets program that has been going on for quite some time. This is part and parcel of that. It's simply moving ahead this work that we've had in place for a long time. The project focus is 4th Avenue between William and Liberty. The scope includes design for public storm main relocation, private utility connections to support Ann Arbor Housing Commission project at 350 South 5th, the water main replacement and streetscape work to improve transit stop comfort and access. It's a partnership project with the city, the Ann Arbor Housing Commission, and the AAA-TA, and it includes a cost share agreement between the DDA, the city, and the AAA-TA. The DDA will manage the contract and receive reimbursement from the city and the AAA-TA. The board supported including this project in the capital improvements plan already, and the CIC recommends approval. Are there any questions, comments from the board? This is moving ahead some work that we're excited about doing. So all those in favor of the resolution to approve a contract with Smith Group for the 4th Avenue Design and Engineering, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Motion passes. Okay. I'd like to move the next resolution. It's the resolution to approve a contract with Smith Group for a downtown area circulation study. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Milton. Open discussion. I'll go over this as well. This second resolution is also a partnership project coming out of the People Friendly Streets 2 effort. The contract scope includes study and public engagement on a range of potential street changes. This includes bikeway connections to neighborhoods, transit priority streets, event streets, a 5th Ave and Division Street 2-way traffic study, and a multimodal operational model. The study will help the DDA and the city have a community conversation and ultimately to prioritize projects that best align with the adopted values. The resolution includes a cost share agreement between the DDA and the city. It's 2/3, 1/3, with the DDA at 67% and the city at 33%. The DDA will manage the contract, just like the last one, and receive reimbursement from the city. The board again supported including this in the CIP, and the Capital Improvements Committee recommends approval. Are there any questions, comments, conversation? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution to approve a contract with Smith Group for a downtown area circulation study, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The motion passes. And finally, I'd like to move the resolution to approve the South Main Street construction cost sharing agreement with the city. Do I have a second?
Second.
Wonderful. Discussion. I'll go over this one. The city is currently replacing a deteriorating water main and street surface, and this is an opportunity for the DDA to upgrade and take over maintenance of the irrigation system. This is the irrigation of the aspects you can see. I think we're going to get some diagrams here. Without this partnership, the irrigation connections would actually be removed, and this aligns with the DDA's responsibilities of taking over the restoration and maintenance of irrigation systems in the State Street project. We're already taken over there, and we'd like these planter boxes and other irrigation systems to remain for South Main. The city will manage the contract, and the DDA, in this case, will reimburse the city for its portion of the construction costs. Are there any questions or comments from the board? It's quiet today. So, all those in favor of a resolution to approve South Main Street construction cost-sharing agreement with the city, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The resolution passes. Just give a quick project update. The State Street contractor has communicated that they plan to begin phase 2 of the State Street project in March, so next month, and that is still weather dependent. This season, work is focused between Washington, for this project, is focused between Washington and North University. The contractor has indicated a desire to complete surface work by the art fair. So that is a valiant goal. We're all hoping for that. They can do it, I think. In February, DTE plans to relocate a gas main between Washington and Liberty Streets. And finally, the DDA staff met with businesses to discuss the project construction schedule. The meeting was recorded and available on the DDA website, along with other construction information. That about wraps it up. The February 15th CIC meeting is actually canceled because there's no agenda items to pile them on early. And the next Capital Improvements Committee meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, March 15th at 11 a.m. Big one. Thanks, everybody. And we will move on to our repositioned board agenda finance committee.
Great. I'm filling in for Mike for today. Our auditing firm Raymond is here, and I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to introduce our guests.
Morning, everybody. We have Daniel Clark and Dan Merritt are here to present the audit report for fiscal year 22, which we closed in June.
Not that I don't trust you.
No, that's fine. Just use it for the-
Yes, certainly. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Daniel Clark, as Sarah just mentioned. I'm the signing principal on the DDA audit this year. Also have with us Dan Merritt. He was the senior manager of the infield, managed the staff in the audit itself. So I'm going to be presenting the first half of this. I'm going to have Dan come up and present the last half, and then we can open up for questions or hear questions as we go through it. Please feel free to stop me as we go through.
Great.
Okay. So you do have the presentation in front of you. These are just a few of the things on slide 2 that we're going to go through today. I introduced myself and Dan, and then Shelby Bailey was the senior on the engagement, also performed infield field work along with Dan. So as is in every audit, there are required board communications. I believe you should have received both the financial statement and then there would have been a separate board communication letter. So these items here were on that board communication letter, and everything in this presentation summarizes both of those documents. So number 1, first and foremost, we did issue an unmodified or a clean opinion on your June 30th, 2022 financial statement. So that's exactly what we were looking for, and similar to in prior years. Number 2, we are asked to assess new accounting pronouncements to see if they have any applicability to the organization. There was one new GASB, which stands for Government Accounting Standards Board, number 87, related to leases. Although there was no direct impact on the entity, we did assess that and deem that that did not have any material impact on the entity. Number 3, we're asked to assess accounting estimates that management has in the financial statements. That would include things like depreciation expense, allowance for doubtful accounts, if any, and those types of items. We assess those and deem those to be reasonable. Number 4, happy to say we did not encounter any difficulties while performing the audit, so all the questions asked were answered, all the information that we asked for was provided. Sarah and her team did a fantastic job being ready for the audit. And then number 5 and 6 speak to that further, that the information that was provided to us, there were no material corrections that were needed to it.
So the records that were provided were clean and accurate. And then the number 6, we had no material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, or other matters that were noted. So again, that speaks to the quality of the records that the DDA keeps. Any questions on that? Okay. So I will go now into the financial side of your financial statements. So this is a summary of your balance sheet. First, the assets that the entity has. And we have a column here for both this year and then in comparison to last year. Just like to talk about any significant changes that happened last year over this year. First, the entity had $29.1 million in total assets at the end of the year. That was up from last year. You had 24.2 or 24.3 million in assets, so an increase of $4.8 million. You'll see 2 of the major things that affected that, one up and then one down, to create that net of 4.8 positive. You did have an increase in cash of just under $7 million, so 6.9. I'll say most of that related to the fact that revenue was significantly higher this year for both the parking and the general fund combined. So again, this is both funds combined. I'm talking about entity-wide, so it's a combination of both funds. And then I believe your parking revenue went from 12.8 million last year, which I know was a low just due to the pandemic, and that has now come back up significantly in 2022 to about 17.9 million. So most of that is that increase in parking specific charges for services. And then expenses remain relatively flat. So again, that pickup of affected mostly your cash there. And then receivables did drop about $2.4 million. I know last year there was a construction fund that is no longer there. There was a receivable for the TIF CIP fund, Fund 494, of about $2.3 million last year, which was not present in this year's audit. All right, and then the other side of the balance sheet are your liabilities. So at the end of 2022, you had 3.4 million in liabilities. Very small change over last year, 3.3. So you'll see it's made up of your accounts payable and accrued liabilities. And then you do have some compensated absences, which relate to your accrual of unused vacation, sick, PTO, etc. Neither of those move significantly one way or the other. So your assets, or I'm sorry, your liabilities increased just about $120,000. And then assets minus liabilities equal your equity or your net position, as we call it in the government world. So you'll see this is a graph of your equity position over the last 5 years. And again, this is entity-wide, so it's both funds, general, and parking. At the end of 2022, you had 25.7 million in equity. That was up significantly, as we just talked about from last year. You had equity of about 20.9, which was a low over the last 3 years. So that continues to increase, just with last year being the only year on this graph that did go down due to that significant decrease in revenue. And then your profit and loss entity-wide, this is just a summary of all revenues. So if you'll see all the way over to the right, 2022, you had 29.5 million in revenues compared to 24.8 million in expenses. So the DDA had a net income, or a change in net position as we call it, of $4.7 million. You'll see 4 out of the last 5 years you had positive income. Last year you did have that loss as your revenue was significantly decreased down to 24.1. And then you'll see that expense actually remained relatively the same. Last year was 25.5. This year is just under 25 million. So with that, I will turn it over to Dave.
Thanks, Daniel. Okay. So next slide here, we're talking about major revenue line items in your governmental funds. So the 2 major revenue sources for the DDA are your parking revenue and your tax revenue. Now, this is our common experience, just looking at that bottom line, which is your property tax revenue. Common experience for Michigan governments, one of the things that helped them maybe through the pandemic, is that property tax revenue stayed roughly the same. I mean, COVID had a number of impacts, but unfortunately, most people continue to pay their property taxes. So as you see, taxable value keeps creeping up a little bit. That sort of property tax line stays fairly consistent and the same. Unfortunately, you also get to see that pandemic impact really, really clearly here on your parking revenue, and especially as if you think about the fact that your fiscal year end is June 30th, you see that 2020 year line item where it just starts to go down. We think about the pandemic started roughly in March of 2020. You saw just a little bit of impact from it that year, and then it just essentially fall off a cliff in 2021. Luckily for the DDA, that seems to have really rebounded. I mean, I think we've seen a robust recovery in the economy as a whole, and that's clearly reflected in the parking revenue for the DDA. And we can sort of see the same thing in the general fund, where if you look back over the last 5 years, that blue revenue line item, that bar, it just sort of increased until 2021, where you start to see some fall off from the general fund as well. And you see that also in that sort of little green bar on the right. That's your change in fund balance for the general fund, where it was on a continued positive path, and then we see a little bit of tailing back there in 2021. Fortunately, strong recovery in 2022, so still in a good shape. Again, we see fund balance for the general fund overall continuing to climb. Remember, what we're seeing on this slide, this is your change in fund balance. So in each year in the general fund, you weren't necessarily seeing a loss. You just were seeing less positive than you might have in other years. So the DDA's general fund continued to climb, just not by as much as it might have without the impact of the pandemic. One way to sort of evaluate how well you're doing in terms of general fund is by thinking about coverage ratio, i.e. for how many months, assuming that expenditures were constant, how many months could you cover expenditures just out of your fund balance? GFOA recommends at least 2 months of fund balance coverage for a government, and you guys have about a little over a year, so you have about a year and 2 months in your general fund. So that's really, really good. That means that you're well set up in sort of like your savings bank, let's call it, to endure anything like a pandemic, like a COVID extreme situation. It also means you have more flexibility in the future to make financial decisions. We're going to see a lot of these similar trends here in the parking fund, just more extremes. The parking fund is more heavily impacted by the results of operations, where the general fund is buoyed by other sources like property taxes to a greater extent. So again, we see sort of like this pandemic dip happening here, and in fact, the parking fund experienced an actual loss in 2021. And you see that reflected in the actual fund balance, where you actually have a net decrease here for 2021. Parking fund coverage ratio, despite the difficulties that the DDA and many other Michigan governments have experienced, the parking fund coverage ratio continues to be good, which means that the DDA did a good job of controlling expenditures during years when revenue was down. We don't see a big dip here in the coverage ratio because expenditures were sort of reduced in accordance with what revenue was coming in. So last thing I just want to cover here, so that's everything on financial results. Of course, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to talk about them. But I want to talk a little bit about upcoming standards. So Daniel talked briefly about the least standard, GASB 87. There are 2 other related standards that are coming out next year that will apply to the DDA, which are GASB 94, which is public-private and public-public partnerships, and GASB 96, which is subscription-based information technology, which we're calling SPIDs. All 3 of these standards are similar, and what they're asking you to do is take long-term agreements and put them on your balance sheet. Governmental accounting hasn't done a great job over the last 10, 15, 20 years of keeping up with FASB in terms of saying, if we have long-term agreements, let's reflect that impact on our balance sheet and show, oh, hey, we have money coming in for a non-cancelable period over a long-term time. We don't necessarily always reflect those agreements on our balance sheet. These 3 standards ask us to look at leases, subscription-based technology arrangements or cloud computing, and any public-private partnerships that you might have. Look at those lease terms, look at those subscription terms, look at those partnership terms and say, is there a guaranteed revenue stream or a guaranteed expenditure stream or an outflow stream that we should really be thinking about putting on the balance sheet and reflecting sort of that long-term liability and or asset. I think the DDA is one of the few organizations that I work with that's likely actually going to be impacted by GASB 94 because you do have a long-term parking agreement with it's a public-private partnership. Now, I can't tell you exactly what that impact will be until we go through next year and do that evaluation of the agreement to look at what that revenue stream is. But it's likely that you're going to have some type of significant balance sheet impact in 2023, showing, hey, yeah, we're obligated to this sort of private entity over this long period of time, and here's what that is. So things that are going to change sort of your accounting in years going forward. So I think that's all we have for the presentation, but we're more than happy to take questions if you have.
Thank you.
Oh, I should also mention, Sarah does a wonderful job. I think her audit documentation is maybe some of the best I've seen just walking in the door. Her work papers are immaculate, and we really appreciate her.
And she didn't pay us to say that.
That's honesty.
Long-term liability. Thanks, Sarah. Thank you all.
So no questions for the auditors there?
It's very thorough.
All right, well, in your packet, page 4, there is a resolution to accept the FY22 audited financial statements, and I'd like to move that resolution and ask for a second.
I second.
Any other questions or discussions? All right, all in favor of approving this resolution to accept the FY? I'm sorry, Tyler.
I love it.
This is my first time here. I thought I had to do that. I'm supposed to move it and hand it off to you. Is that right?
We'll do that.
All right.
All those in favor of the resolution to accept the DDA's audited financial statements for fiscal year 2022, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Resolution passes.
Tyler was doing a lot of talking earlier, so
Yeah,
he
Tyler,
appreciates
come
the
on,
break.
man.
I love it. You're doing great.
All right. So also in your packet, there is a resolution to approve bank signatories. And that is on page 6. And I'd like to move that resolution.
Second.
I have a few notes here. So this resolution adds Maura Thompson as a signatory, bringing us back up to 3 signatories, and this is the same format as approved at the annual meeting last June.
I'm sorry, you did a second time.
And now he's expecting it.
What was that?
Now he's expecting you to do it.
Oh, no, I can do it all. I thought you were going to take it away. I thought there might even be.
I'm following instructions now.
No instruction, okay. Are there any other comments on that resolution in motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution to approve signatories, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The resolution passes.
A few more Finance Committee updates.
Yeah, thank you.
The staff is preparing FY24 and 25 budgets. The Finance Committee will review the requested budget in detail along with the 10-year plan at its February 23rd meeting. The board will be asked to put the budget forward to the city at their meeting on March 1st. And the budget will then be included in the city's YouTube presentations in March before being considered by council and coming back to the board for final adoption in June. And I know Sarah's available if there's any questions on that 24-25 budget process, but those are the Finance Committee updates.
Great. Next meeting?
The next meeting is February 23rd, Thursday, February 23rd at 9 a.m.
Thanks, Mike. Well done.
Thank you.
Next up is Operations Committee. Mr. Massey, take it away.
Sure. Hi, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Peter Eckstein, for your remarks and your call. I very much hear your call for us to change our processes in order to meet the pace that circumstances call for. I think I appreciate it and I hear it, and I'd like to echo the comments that Maura and Tyler made, acknowledging the gravity of this topic. We are also shifting gears. We are also bringing a resolution to the board to approve a professional services agreement with Fishbeck for engineering services and project administration for fiscal year 24 parking structure repairs. You'll find it on page 20 of your package. And so I'm going to move that resolution and ask for a second.
Thanks for the second.
Discussion about this $119,900 proposal.
Talk a little bit about it.
No.
No?
I don't, it's in the packet.
Yeah.
If there's no discussion, I don't need to recap it.
Sure. All right, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the resolution to approve a professional services agreement with Fishback for engineering services and project administration for fiscal year 24 parking structure repairs, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The resolution passes.
Thank you. Also in the board packet is the quarterly revenue report. The accounting report talked a little bit about the macro patterns that we've seen over the last couple of years, and in the operations committee we discussed the kind of rebound that we're seeing this year relative to last year's revenue patterns. Do we want to discuss the report, or am I just, I don't know.
You can sort of summarize, but it's available if anyone has any further questions and concerns.
Yeah. And then additional to that, I have updates. The curb management study, which we alluded to earlier. Darren brought up the question of loading and unloading that's part of this study. Walker Consultants have met with the Disabilities Commission, the Transportation Commission, the DDA board, and the street design team. They've created a database and a curb mapping tool, and they're going to present it to the operations committee at our next meeting. They are developing a pilot program based on what they've gathered so far to include 15-minute paid parking zones on Liberty and Forest, where it turns out turnover is a lot faster than the 2-hour kind of window that exists there. So piloting a 15-minute zone to align with and incentivize that turnover in high demand places. And the goal of this study, as you may recall, is to provide pragmatic and implementable recommendations for these parking zone pilots that we could undertake now and things we might want to consider in the future. And Jada is here to answer any questions if anyone has about the curb management study. I also have an update about the parking rate study. We released an RFP. This is to examine the rates we charge for parking, which have remained steady for more than a decade now. So the RFP was released in December. Responses were due at the end of the day yesterday, so I think we will soon be learning more about the quantity and nature of that response pool. We will be seeking a comprehensive review and recommendations from this consultant, whichever consultant is hired. And then the operations committee will work with the finance committee to develop recommendations and bring them back to the board.
Jonathan, just for the record, the hourly rates in the structures have remained constant for more than a decade, but we're at the end of a 5-year scheduled increase for the on-street meter, so there's 2 different rates depending on location.
Thank you. Are there questions about either of these studies for Jada? Okay, then I can conclude by noting that the next meeting of the Operations Committee will be Wednesday, February 22nd at 11 a.m.
Thank you, Jonathan. Moving ahead to the Affordable Housing and Economic Development Committee. 2 updates. We met in November. It was a discussion on the unhoused population in and around Ann Arbor and its downtown. We had the guests Aubrey Coutinho from Avalon Housing, Teresa Gelati, formerly of Washtenaw County Office of Community and Economic Development, and Jennifer Hall, Director of the Ann Arbor Housing Commission. Dan Kelly was scheduled to come. Unfortunately, he had to attend to a slight emergency as his wife hit a deer, and they had to take care of a number of things. So it unfortunate he was with us there. It was a really productive and fruitful conversation about the opportunities, the challenges, the numbers associated with the unhoused population, and I can give a more comprehensive conversation of that if anybody would like it, but also we will plan to have more in the future. So this is an ongoing discussion, and the goal of which is to sort of raise awareness of what Ann Arbor is dealing with and how best to go about helping. I'll also move ahead to the January meeting with the partners. So I'll quickly go through some of the updates from the partners. The Ann Arbor District Library proposed that their proposed partnership project between the downtown library and a developer that was reported in NLive did not materialize due to a substantial rise in costs. The library is currently open and sort of seeking other possible partnerships to expand and sort of renew their branch in the downtown at least. Work continues on the Scioto Township site to house the library's archives, office space, and large equipment rental storage, which will free up more space for the public use at the downtown location. So the Ann Arbor Housing Commission, they received HUD's Move to Work designation, which provides more flexibility for spending funds aimed at landlord recruitment and retention. The project costs for the 121 East Catherine project are 55% higher than the pre-pandemic numbers. With their tax credit cap at $13.5 million, the Housing Commission is exploring redesign options to try to reduce these costs, and they're working on raising additional funds. The 350 South 5th Ave, the Y lot, that site is facing similar cost impacts and rises. It's challenging. The 415 West Washington site, the plan is ready to be submitted for supplemental and PUD regulation review. So that's in its early stages, but they're going through that. The Planning Commission, the House on Division in the Historic District has been approved as a net zero 3-unit student development. Another is a 14-story development at Packard and State has been approved. That is on the Sushi Town and I think the hardware. I think it's Jack's. Yeah. And council approved an ordinance allowing solar panels to be installed in yards in residential areas. So that's kind of an interesting one. And the ordinance eliminating natural gas connections is currently being written. From City Council, Councilmember Jennifer Cornell and Councilmember Jen Iyer have been appointed to the committee, so we look forward to their presence. Jen Cornell was able to come and be at her first meeting. From the AAATA, the AAATA continues to prepare for the millage funding that begins in 2024. There is renovation work underway at the Ipsy Transit Center, and they're still facing some staffing shortages, and the challenges associated with that continue, particularly in the office areas. For the DDA, we simply shared the updates on our current projects. So that concludes the aheads overview. Our next meeting is February 8th at 9 a.m., the DDA only meeting. Moving ahead to the Executive Committee. The Executive Committee did not have a quorum today. As a quick update, we have now fully transitioned to Maura as our interim director. She's doing a wonderful job. We do plan to begin a search for our next executive director. That will be coming down the line. It's not been initiated just yet. We have a fairly new board. We have a lot on our plate, and so we're not going to do that right away, but it is in the works. So if you'd like to have any conversations about that, feel free to reach out. But it is something that is planned for the future. It's just not right at this moment. Our next executive committee meeting is Wednesday, March 1st at 11:30. And we are now to new business. Is there any new business from the board? Seeing none, we are now open to public comment. If anyone from the public would like to speak, you have 4 minutes and you may approach the microphone. Seeing none, we have concluded our meeting here. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, please say aye. All those opposed, please say
We need
no.
a motion.
Excuse me. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. We are adjourned.